Deputy Speaker, everyone agrees, including your Finance Minister, Mr. President, that the only sustainable option for the way forward in our economy is through structural reform if we're going to unlock economic growth. In fact, Mr. President, structural reform was the basis on which you campaigned for the presidency of your party and for the country, and yet we stand here in Parliament today, 3 years later, and you've got nothing to show for it. Yesterday we heard we're going to have to spend 33 billion rand bailing out South African Airways to save 1,000 jobs. Mr. President, the question to you is this: will you today make the brave stand and stand with the 3 million South Africans who are going to lose their jobs and oppose the 33 billion rand bailout, or are you going to see that money being poured into the abyss of state-owned entity like South African Airways, where it could have been used to save the lives and livelihoods of millions of more South Africans? Mr. President, at the beginning of the pandemic, you asked South Africans to make sacrifices. And South Africans have complied, and this has come at a huge cost. Many have lost their jobs and their businesses that they've spent years building up. However, Mr. President, you and your government have not played your part in the pandemic by being transparent with how you have made these decisions and the data and modeling that informs them. You've withheld all but the very top-level COVID data from the citizens of this country, including the model which you say you have relied upon to implement the lockdown, the initial lockdown, but then to extend the hardest, longest, and most brutal lockdown in the world during this period. Mr. President, why do you believe that citizens who've sacrificed so much do not have the right to this information? Small, medium, and micro enterprises are the engine room of job creation. Let's also be clear, Mr. President, that government has not released the data, as you alluded to earlier. We have 8 PIRE applications outstanding. Let's also be clear, Mr. President, that your response has not been science-led. The scientists were telling you weeks ago to open the economy, and the lockdown had done its work. Now, Mr. President, even though it came 2 months too late, and yet the fact that your protracted hard lockdown has now severely damaged the economy, you last night announced that significant parts of the economy will now be reopened. Now, the lockdown is all but over in name only. You're the only person who still believes that we're in lockdown advanced level 3, or whatever that means. And given this, why do you insist on keeping us in a state of disaster? And what can you do under a state of disaster that you cannot do under the ordinary course of governance? The President's response that he will not walk away from the job-killing policies and he is determined to double down on the very policies that have pushed 10 million people into the unemployment queue, that have kept people locked in poverty and kept out of opportunity in the country. So he wanted a progressive suggestion. Here's one for you, Mr. President. Turn your back on bailing out the SAA with 33 billion rand and put that money directly into funds and projects that are going to be able to assist South Africans to find work and to get